My brother's martial arts academy was standing room only, packed with wealthy local donors and our snobbish parents, all eager to watch me get humiliated. Brad strutted onto the mat, adjusting his newly minted Taekwondo black belt like a crown. He shoved a contract into my hands and sneered, "Survive 3 minutes on the mat with me, little sister, and I'll sign over the deed to Dad's old youth center. Lose, and you pack up your little charity camp and leave town for good." My parents smirked, completely convinced their golden boy son was about to crush his delicate sister. What Brad and my parents failed to remember was that while he'd spent the last 5 years paying for padded dojo medals, I'd spent 8 years as a Marine captain leading combat readiness units. I looked at the contract, looked back at his arrogant grin, and slowly tied my hair back. My name is Claire Vance. I'm 36 years old, and if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that arrogance makes people blind to reality. Growing up, my older brother Brad was the undisputed golden child of the Vance family. While our parents showered him with endless praise, country club memberships, and thousands of dollars for whatever new hobby caught his eye, I was expected to sit quietly in his shadow. When I turned 18 and decided to join the United States Marine Corps instead of attending the elite private university my parents picked out, they practically disowned me. To them, I was a disappointment who ruined the family aesthetic. Brad spent the next decade coasting on Dad's money, eventually opening a high-end martial arts academy and boasting about his newly earned black belt. I spent my time deploying overseas, earning my rank as a Marine captain, and learning what real survival actually looks like. Years later, after leaving active duty, I returned home with a mission: to open a nonprofit fitness and youth mentorship camp using our family's abandoned community center. But Brad wanted that exact property to expand his luxury gym empire. He thought he could bully, manipulate, and intimidate his delicate younger sister into walking away. He genuinely believed his expensive dojo credentials made him invincible, completely forgetting the kind of training it takes to lead Marines into combat. It didn't take long for Brad to escalate things. Instead of having a normal conversation about the community center, he invited me to his academy's annual charity gala, a glitzy, black-tie event filled with wealthy local donors, city council members, and, of course, our beaming parents. I showed up in a clean, modest blazer, expecting a quick meeting in his back office. Instead, Brad waited until the crowd was at its largest, walked onto the center mat with a microphone in hand, and called me out directly. With an arrogant smirk that made my stomach turn, he announced to the entire room that his charity-minded little sister was struggling to accept reality. He claimed he wanted to settle our property dispute like true athletes. In front of 50 influential guests and 2 local news cameras, Brad pulled a folded legal contract from his suit jacket. He declared that if I could step onto the mat and survive just 3 minutes in an exhibition match against him, he'd sign over the property deed on the spot. If I lost or refused to fight, I had to sign a waiver surrendering all claims to the land and leave town for good. My parents sat in the front row, snicker-laughing and sipping champagne, thoroughly enjoying what they thought was my imminent humiliation. They believed I'd break down, surrender, and run. What Brad didn't realize was that by putting that contract in writing in front of dozens of witnesses, he'd just handed me everything I needed. What Brad failed to understand was the massive chasm between sport fighting and real combat. Over the past 5 years, my brother had built his entire martial arts persona on controlled point sparring. He paid thousands of dollars for customized gear, spent weekends winning trophy tournaments with padded rules, and practiced high-flying kicks designed strictly for show. In his dojo, every hit stopped when a whistle blew, every strike had a referee, and no one was ever actually trying to hurt him. Brad's black belt was a symbol of vanity, an expensive accessory bought with Dad's money to stroke his fragile ego. My background couldn't have been more different. During my 8 years in the Marine Corps, combat training wasn't about scoring points or posing for cameras. As a captain, I was certified under the Marine Corps Martial Arts Program, MCMAP, a brutal, no-nonsense system built for extreme hand-to-hand survival. I spent years training in close-quarters combat, learning how to disarm attackers, neutralize threats instantly, and maintain total mental discipline under intense physical duress. I've sparred with 200-pound infantrymen in full combat gear on mud-soaked mats, where panic meant defeat and vanity got you carried off on a stretcher. Standing there in front of his wealthy donors, I looked at Brad's polished posture and realized he truly had no idea who he was dealing with. To him, I was still the quiet teenager who ran away to the military. He saw a smaller, soft-spoken younger sister in a blazer, completely blind to the fact that he was challenging a trained Marine who knew exactly how to dismantle his flashy, fragile style in seconds. The room went deathly quiet as I kicked off my shoes, pulled off my blazer, and stepped onto the polished red mat. Brad bounced on his toes, shaking out his arms in a theatrical display he'd clearly practiced in the mirror. In the front row, my father casually sipped his champagne, leaning over to whisper something to my mother that made them both chuckle. They were settling in for a quick show, expecting me to cower the moment Brad made a move. Brad took a wide, flashy stance, his black belt tied with crisp perfection. 3 minutes, Claire, he taunted, flashing a confident grin at the local news camera. Just try not to cry when you forfeit. He didn't wait. The moment the dojo assistant called start, Brad charged forward to end things instantly. He threw a jumping, high-flying roundhouse kick aimed straight at my head, a dramatic move meant to look incredible for his wealthy clients and leave me flat on my back. He expected me to duck in terror or freeze. Instead, my Marine conditioning kicked in effortlessly. I didn't panic. I didn't even flinch. I took one smooth step inside his turning radius, slipped beneath the arc of his leg, and used his own airborne momentum against him. With a simple, controlled guide of my forearm, I redirected his force. Brad completely missed his target, twisted awkwardly in midair, and crashed onto the hard mat with a loud, breath-stealing thud. The entire room froze. The champagne glass in my father's hand stopped halfway to his mouth, and the smirk vanished from Brad's face as he scrambled to his feet, gasping for air. The silence in the dojo didn't last long. Embarrassed, furious, and bleeding his dignity in front of his high society clients, Brad's face turned bright red. The theatrical composure vanished completely. Forgetting all his polished form and tournament etiquette, he let out a frustrated growl and lunged directly at me, swinging a barrage of wild, aggressive strikes aimed straight at my face. He was fighting out of pure rage, completely abandoning his defense. To an untrained spectator, his sudden aggression looked terrifying. To a Marine captain, it was a textbook display of sloppy amateurism. I stayed completely calm, keeping my hands up in a tight, disciplined guard. I didn't throw a single offensive punch. Instead, I simply pivoted, slipping his frantic jabs and parrying his heavy hooks with minimal effort. Every time he tried to push forward, I stepped into his blind spots, forcing him to overextend and exhaust his lungs. Within 90 seconds, Brad was heaving for air, his wild swings growing slower and heavier. With 30 seconds left on the clock, Brad made his fatal mistake. Desperate to land just one solid blow, he telegraphed a heavy right cross, throwing all his weight behind it. I slipped under his arm, closed the distance, and executed a swift textbook leg sweep. Before he could react, I caught his extended arm, took him to the mat, and locked him into a firm, inescapable shoulder lock. I didn't break anything, but the pressure was absolute. Brad thrashed wildly for 3 seconds before realization set in. In front of his donors, his clients, and his stunned parents, my brother furiously tapped the mat in defeat. The room was utterly lifeless as I released the lock and stood up, smoothing down my shirt. Brad lay on the mat, gasping for air and clutching his arm, his ego thoroughly shattered in front of his entire donor base. The local news camera was still rolling, capturing every second of the Golden Boy's swift defeat. My parents snapped out of their shock and rushed toward the mat. "Claire, stop this nonsense right now," my mother gasped, her voice trembling with embarrassment. My father glared at me, his face red with indignation. "You set him up. Void this match immediately. He wasn't prepared for your cheap military tricks." I didn't argue. Instead, I calmly picked up the folded contract Brad had signed on stage, held it directly in front of the news lens so the camera could capture his official signature, and walked over to my brother. "A bet is a bet, Brad," I said softly, holding out a pen. "Sign the deed transfer, or tomorrow morning I hand this tape, along with the signed challenge, to every local station in the city." Brad looked at his parents, then at his horrified clients, realizing he had zero leverage left. His reputation as a martial arts master was completely ruined if he went back on his word. With shaking hands, he took the pen and signed over the property deed right there on the mat. I folded the document, tucked it safely into my pocket, and walked out of the dojo without looking back once. 6 months later, Dad's old, abandoned building was completely transformed into the Vance Community Youth Center, a thriving hub offering free fitness classes, academic tutoring, and leadership mentorship for local kids who needed it most. Meanwhile, Brad's luxury gym expansion completely collapsed before it even got off the ground. Once video of our match leaked online, his dojo lost half its high-paying clientele, proving that fancy belts and bought trophies can never replace genuine discipline and character. In the end, my brother learned a lesson he'll never forget. Flashy titles don't make you a fighter, and you should never underestimate a Marine. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have fought for the property deed or walked away? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out the next story on your screen.